Nicholas, an unexpected letter arrived in the mail for me the next day. I don't know why I didn't rip it open and read it. I just stood there wondering why Matt Harrison had written me a letter when he could easily have picked up the phone or come over. I stood at the end of the driveway in front of the weather beaten off white mailbox. I opened the letter carefully and held it tight so it wouldn't be blown away by the ocean wind. Rather than try to paraphrase what the letter said, Nikki, I'm enclosing it in the diary. Dear Suzanne, you are the explosion of carnations in a dark room, or the unexpected scent of pine miles from Maine. You are a full moon that gives midnight its meaning, and the explanation of water for all living things. You are a compass, a sapphire, a bookmark, a rare coin, a smooth stone, a blue marble. You are an old lore, a small shell, a saved silver dollar. You are a fine quartz, a feathered quill, and a fob from a favorite watch. You are a valentine, tattered and loved and reread 100 times. You are a medal found in the drawer of a once sung hero. You are honey and cinnamon and West Indies spices lost from the boat that was once Marco Polo's. You are a pressed rose, a pearl ring, and a red perfume bottle found near the Nile. You are an old soul from an ancient place, 1,000 years and centuries and millenniums ago. And you have traveled all this way just so I could love you. I do. Matt. What can I say, Nicholas? That your good, sweet father cannot say better? He is a stunningly good writer, and I'm not even sure he knows it. I love him so much. Who wouldn't? Nikki. I called Matt very early the next morning, as soon as I dared, about 7. I had been up since a little past 4, thinking that I had to call him, even rehearsing what I should say and how I should say it. I don't really know how to be dishonest or manipulate people very well. It puts me at a great disadvantage sometimes. This was hard. This was impossible. Matt, hi, it's Suzanne. Hope I'm not calling too early. Can you come by tonight? Was all I could manage. Of course I can. In fact, I was going to call you and ask for a date. Matt arrived at the house a little past 7 that night. He was wearing a yellow plaid shirt and navy blue trousers, kind of formal for him. You want to take a walk on the beach, Suzanne? Take in the sunset with me? It was exactly what I wanted to do. He'd read my mind. As soon as we crossed the beach road and had our bare feet in the still warm sand, I said, Can I talk? There's something I have to tell you. He smiled. Sure, I always like the sound of your voice. Poor Matt. I doubted that he was going to like the sound of what was coming next. There's something I've wanted to tell you for a while. I keep putting it off. I'm not even sure how to broach the subject now. He took my hand, swung it gently in rhythm with our strides. Consider it broached. Go ahead, Suzanne. Why are you so dressed up tonight? I thought to ask him. I'm dressed up because I have a date with the most special woman on this entire island. Is that the subject you had trouble broaching? I squeezed his hand a little. Not exactly. No, it isn't. Okay, here goes. Matt finally said, You are scaring me a little now. Sorry, I whispered. Sorry, Matt. Right before I came to the vineyard, you had a heart attack, he said in the softest voice. You almost died in the public garden, but you didn't. Thank God. And now, here we are, and I think we're two of the luckiest people. I know that I am. I'm here holding your hand, looking into your beautiful blue eyes. I stopped walking and stared at Matt in disbelief. The setting sun was just over his shoulder, and it looked like a nimbus. Was Matthew an angel? How long have you known? How did you know? I stammered. I heard before I came to work for you. This is a small island, Suzanne. I was half expecting some old biddy with a walker. I did use a walker for a couple of days in Boston. I had surgery. So you knew, but you never told me you knew? I didn't think it was my place. I knew that you'd tell me when you were ready. I guess you're ready, Suzanne. That's good news. I've been thinking about what happened to you a lot in the past few weeks. I even arrived at a point of view. Would you like to hear it? I held on to Matt's arm. Of course I would. Well, I can't help thinking of this whenever we're together. I think, isn't it lucky that Suzanne didn't die in Boston and we have today to be together? Now we get to watch the sunset. Or isn't it lucky Suzanne didn't die and we're sitting out on her front porch playing hearts? We're watching a stupid Red Sox game? We're listening to Mozart? Or even that smarmy love song you like by Savage Garden? I keep thinking, isn't this day, this moment, incredibly special because you're here, Suzanne? I started to cry. And that's when Matt took me into his arms. We cuddled on the beach for a long time, and I never wanted him to let me go. Never, ever. We fit together so well. I kept thinking, isn't this moment incredibly special? Aren't I the lucky one? Suzanne, I heard him whisper, and I felt Matt's warm breath on my cheek. I'm here. Hard to miss. I'm right here in your arms. I'm not going anywhere. That's good. I want you to always be there. I love having you in my arms. Now, there's something I have to say, Suzanne. I love you so much. I treasure everything about you. I miss you when we're apart for just a couple of hours. Every day while I'm working, I can't wait to see you that night. I've been looking for you for a long time. I just didn't know it. But now I do. Suzanne, will you marry me? I pulled back and looked into the beautiful eyes of this precious man I had found somehow, or maybe he had found me. I couldn't stop smiling, and the warm glow spreading inside me was the most incredible feeling. I love you, Matt. I've been looking for you for a long time, too. Yes, I'll marry you. Katie. Katie closed the diary again. She slammed it shut this time. It hurt her so much to read these pages. She could take them only in small doses. Matt had warned her in his letter that it might happen, and it had. There will be parts that may be hard for you to read. What an incredible understatement that was. The diary continued to put her in a place of unexpected surprises. Now it was making her jealous. Something she didn't think she was capable of. She was jealous of Suzanne. She kind of felt like a jerk, a small and petty person, not herself. Maybe it was hormones, or maybe it was just a normal reaction to everything abnormal that had happened to her recently. She shut her eyes tight and felt incredibly alone. She hugged herself with both arms. She needed to talk to someone besides Genevieve and Merlin. Ironically, the person she wanted to reach out to was on Martha's Vineyard. As much as she wanted to, she wouldn't call him. She would call her friends, Lori or Gilda or Susan, but not Matt. Her eyes moved over to the bookshelves she had built into her walls. Her apartment was like a small bookstore, very independent. Orlando, The Age of Innocence, Bella Tuscany, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, The God of Small Things. She'd been reading voraciously ever since she was 7 or 8. She read everything and anything. She was feeling a little queasy again. Cold, too. She wrapped herself in a blanket and watched Ally McBeal on TV. Ally turned 30 in the episode and Katie cried. She wasn't nearly as crazy as Ally and her friends, but the show still hit a nerve. She lay on her living room couch and couldn't stop thinking about the baby growing inside her. It's all right, little baby, she whispered. I hope so, anyway. Katie remembered the night when she had gotten pregnant. She had a fantasy in bed that night, but she dismissed it, thinking, I've never gotten pregnant before. She hadn't ever missed a period, except one time in college when she'd been playing varsity basketball at North Carolina and learned that her body fat was too low. That last night with Matt, Katie had felt that it had never been like this before. Something had changed between them. She could feel it in the way he held her and looked at her with his luminous brown eyes. She felt some of his walls come down. Felt, this is it. He was ready to tell her things that he hadn't been able to talk about. Had that scared Matt? Had he felt it too? That last night we were together? Was that what had happened? She had never felt as close to Matt as she had that night. She always loved being with him, but that night it was urgent. They were both so needy. Katie recalled that it had started so simply. All he had done was wrap his fingers around hers. He slid his free arm beneath her and stared into her eyes. Next, their legs touched. Then their entire bodies reached toward each other. She and Matt never lost eye contact, and it seemed as if they were really one in a way that they hadn't been before that night. His eyes said, I love you, Katie. She couldn't have been wrong about that. She had always wanted it to be like that, just like that. She'd had that thought, that dream, 1,000 times before it actually happened. His strong arms were around her back, and her long legs were wrapped around his. She knew she could never forget any of those images or sensations. He was so light when he was on top of her, supporting himself on his elbows, his knees. He was athletic, graceful, giving, dominating. He whispered her name over and over. Katie, sweet Katie, my Katie, Katie, Katie. This was it. She knew. He was completely aware and attuned to her, and she had never experienced such love with anyone before. She loved it, loved Matt, and she pulled him deep inside, where they made a baby. Chapter 3. Katie knew what she had to do the next morning, 7 a.m., but it wasn't too early for this. This was it. She called home, Asheboro, nestled between the Blue Ridge and Great Smoky Mountains in North Carolina, where life had always been simpler. Kinder, too. Much, much kinder. So why had she left Asheboro? She wondered as the phone began to ring. To follow her love of books? It was her passion, something she truly loved. Or had she just needed to see a world larger than the one she knew in the heart of North Carolina? Hey, Katie, her mother answered on the third ring. You're up with the city birds this morning. How are you doing, sweetie? They had caller ID in Asheboro now. Everything was changing, wasn't it? For better or for worse, or maybe somewhere in between. Hey, Mom, what's the latest? You doing a little better today? Her mother asked. She knew that Katie had found someone in New York. She knew all about Matt and had loved it when Katie called to talk about him, especially when she said they would be probably getting married. Now he had left her, and Katie was suffering. She didn't deserve that. Her mother had tried to get her to come home, but Katie wouldn't do it. She was too tough. Right. A big city girl. Well, her mother knew better. Some. Yeah, sure. Well, actually, no. I'm still a mess. I'm pitiful. I'm hopeless. I'd swore I never let a man get me into a state like this, and here I am. Katie began to tell her mother about the diary and what she had read so far. The lesson of the 5 balls, Suzanne's daily routine on Martha's Vineyard, how she met Matt again. You know what's so strange, Mom? I actually like Suzanne. Damn it, I'm such a sap. I ought to hate her, but I can't do it. Of course you can't. Well, at least this dumb bunny Matt has good taste in women, her mother said, and cackled as she always did. She could be wicked funny when she wanted to be. Katie was always grateful that she'd inherited her mom's sense of humor, but she didn't feel like joking. Tell her, Katie was thinking to herself, tell her everything. But she couldn't. She had told her 2 best friends in New York, Lori Riley and Suzanne Kingsolver, but couldn't tell her mother she was pregnant. The words just wouldn't come out of her mouth. Why not? Katie wondered, but she knew the answer. She didn't want to hurt her mother and father. They meant too much to her. Her mom was quiet for a moment. Holly Wilkinson was still a first-grade teacher in Asheboro, Katie's mentor for 30 years. She was always, always there for her, supportive, even when Katie had gone to the dreaded, hated New York and her father didn't talk to her for a month. Tell her, Katie, she'll understand. She can help you. But Katie just couldn't get the words out. She choked on them and felt bile rising from her stomach. Katie and her mother talked for almost an hour, and then she spoke to her father. She was almost as close to him as she was to her mom. He was a minister, much beloved in the area because he taught God loving instead of God fearing. The only time he'd ever been really mad at Katie was when she had packed up and moved to New York. But he got over it, and he never threw it up in her face anymore. Her mother and father were like that, good people. And so was she, Katie thought, and knew it was true. Good people. So why had Matt left her? How could he just walk out of her life? And what was the diary supposed to tell her that would somehow make her understand? What was the deep, dark secret of the diary? That Matt had a smart, wonderful wife and a beautiful, darling child, and that he had slipped up with her, had an affair with a New York woman. Strayed for the first time in his picture perfect marriage? Damn him. Damn him. When she had finished talking to her dad, Katie sat in her study with her good buddies, Genevieve and Merlin. They curled up on the couch with her and looked out the bay window at the Hudson. She loved the river, the way it changed every day, or even several times in the same day. The river was a lesson, just like the lesson of the five balls. What should I do? She whispered to Genevieve and Merlin. Tears welled up in her eyes, then spilled down her cheeks. Katie picked up the phone again. She sat there, nervously tapping the receiver with her fingernail. It took all the courage she had, but she finally dialed a number. Katie almost hung up, but she waited through ring after ring. Finally, she got the answering machine. She choked up when she actually heard a voice. This is Matt. Your message is important to me. Please leave it at the beep. Thanks. Katie left a message. She hoped it was important to Matt. I'm reading the diary, she said. That was all. The diary. Come to our wedding, Nikki. This is your invitation. I want you to know exactly what it was like on the day your mother and father pledged their love. Snow was falling gently on the island. The bells were ringing in the clear, cold, crisp December air as dozens of frosty well-wishers crossed the threshold into the Gay Head Community Church, which happens to be the oldest Indian Baptist church in the country. It's also one of the loveliest. There is only one word that can describe our wedding day: joy. Matt and I were both giddy. I was just about flying among the angels carved in the four corners of the chapel ceiling. I really did feel like an angel in an antique white dress, strung with 100 luminescent pearls. My grandfather came to Martha's Vineyard for the first time in 15 years, just to walk me down the aisle. All my doctor friends from Boston made the trip in the dead of winter. Some of my septuagenarian patients came too. The church was full, standing room only for the ecumenical service. As you might have guessed, just about everybody on the island is a friend of Matt's. He was incredibly handsome in a jazzy black tux, with his hair trimmed for the occasion, but not too short. His eyes bright and shining, his beautiful smile more radiant than it had ever been. Can you see it, Nicky? With the snow lightly blowing in from the ocean? It was glorious. Are you as happy as I am? Matt leaned toward me and whispered as we stood before the altar. You look incredibly beautiful. I felt myself blush, which was unlike me. Doctor control, doctor self confidence, doctor hold it together. But a feeling of unguarded vulnerability washed over me as I looked into Matt's eyes. This was so right. I've never been happier, never surer of anything in my life, I said. We made our pledge on December 31st, just before the new year arrived. There was something almost magical about becoming husband and wife on New Year's Eve. It felt to me as if the whole world were celebrating with us. Seconds after Matt and I pledged our vows, everyone in the church stood and yelled, Happy New Year, Matt and Suzanne. Silvery white feathers were released from dozens of satin pouches that had been carefully strung from the ceiling. Matt and I were in a blizzard of angels and clouds and doves. We kissed and held each other tightly. How do you like the first moment of marriage, Mrs. Harrison? He asked. I think he liked saying Mrs. Harrison, and I liked hearing it for the first time. If I had known how wonderful it was going to be, I'd have insisted we married 20 years ago, I said. Matt grinned and went along with me. How could we? We didn't even know each other. Oh, Matt, I said, we've known each other all our lives. We must have. I couldn't help remembering what Matt had said the night he proposed on the beach in front of my house. Isn't it lucky, he said. Suzanne didn't die in Boston, and we have today to be together. I was incredibly lucky, and it gave me a chill as I stood there with Matt on our wedding night. That's what it felt like. That was the exact feeling, and I'm so happy that now you were there. Nicholas. Matt and I went on a whirlwind 3-week honeymoon that started on New Year's Day. The first week, we were on Lani in Hawaii. It was a glorious spot, the best, with only 2 hotels on the entire island. No wonder Bill Gates chose it for his honeymoon, too. I soon discovered that I loved Matt even more than I had before he proposed. We never wanted to leave Lonnie. He would paint houses and finish his first collection of poems. I would be an island doctor. The second week we went to Hana on Maui, and it was almost as special as Lonnie. We had our mantra, "Isn't it lucky?" We must have said it 100 times. Matt and I spent the third week back home on the vineyard, but we didn't see much of anyone, not even Jean or Melanie Bone and her kids. We were luxuriating in the newness and specialness of being together for the rest of our lives. I suppose that not all honeymoons work out so well, but ours did. Nick, here's something your father did, something so thoughtful and special that I will always hold it close to my heart. Every single day of our honeymoon, Matt woke me in bed with a honeymoon present. Some of them were small, some were funny, and some were extravagant, but every present came straight from Matt's heart. Isn't it lucky? I'll never forget this. It hit me like a wave of seasickness on February 7th. Unfortunately, Matt had already gone to work, and I was alone in the house. I sat down on the edge of the tub, feeling as if my life were draining away. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck, and for the first time in over a year, I wanted to call a doctor. It seemed odd to want a second opinion. I was always diagnosing myself. But today, I felt just bad enough to want to ask someone else, "Hey, what do you think?" Instead, I threw cold water on my face and told myself it was probably a touch of the flu, which was making the rounds. I took something to settle my stomach, dressed, and went to work. By noon, I wasn't feeling much better, and by dinner, I had forgotten about it. It wasn't until the next morning that I found myself sitting on the edge of the tub once more, spent, tired, and feeling nauseated. That's when I knew. I called Matt on the cell phone, and he was surprised to hear from me so soon after he'd left the house. "Are you okay? Is everything all right, Suzanne?" "I think that everything just got perfect," I told him. "If you can, I'd like you to come home right now. On your way, could you stop at the drugstore? Would you pick up an EPT kit? I want to be absolutely sure, but Matt, we're pregnant." Nicholas, you were growing inside me, a speck, no larger than a grain of cereal. What can I tell you, Nicky? Happiness flooded our hearts in every room of the beach cottage. It came like high tide on a full moon. After the wedding, Matt had moved into my house. It was his idea. He said it was best to rent his place out since I was so established with my patients and my proximity to the hospital was ideal. It was considerate and sweet of him, which is his way. For a big, tough guy, he's awfully nice. Your daddy is the best. I would have missed the ocean, our sweet and salty garden, and the summer shutters that clack all night against the house when it's windy. But now I don't have to. We decided to make the sunroom of the house yours. We thought you loved the way the morning light comes pouring over the sills to fill every nook and cranny. Daddy and I began converting it into a perfect nursery, gathering things we thought you might love. We hung wallpaper that danced with Mother Goose stories. There were your bears, your first books, and colorful wall quilts that hung over your crib. The same crib Daddy had when he was a baby. Grandma Jean had saved it all these years. Just for you, Pumpkin. We jammed the shelves with far too many variously colored stuffed animals and every variety of ball known to sportsmen. Daddy made an oak rocking horse that boasted a beautiful one of a kind crimson and gold mane. Daddy also made you delicately balanced mobiles filled with moons and stars, galaxy, and a music box to hang in your crib. Every time you pull the cord, it plays Whistle a Happy Tune. Whenever I hear that song, I think of you. We can't wait to meet you. Nick, Matt is at it again. A present was on the kitchen table when I got home from work. Gold paper covered in hearts and tied blue ribbon concealed the contents. I couldn't possibly love him any more than I do. I shook the small package, and a tiny note dropped out from under the bow. It read, "Working late tonight, Suze, but thinking about you, as always. Open this when you get in and get relaxed. I'll be back by 10. Matt." I wondered where Matt was working until 10, but I let it go. I unwrapped the box carefully and lifted tiny lid. Inside was the most beautiful antique necklace, a sapphire locket in the shape of a heart, hung from a silver chain. It was probably 150 years old. I pressed the clasp, and the heart opened to reveal a message that had been engraved inside: Nicholas, Suzanne, and Matt, forever one. Nick. A few years back, there was a book called The Bridges of Madison County. Its huge success was partly due to the fact that so many people seemed to be missing romance and emotion in their lives. But an underlying premise of the novel was that romance can last for only a short time. In this particular book, only a couple of days for the main characters, Robert and Francesca. Romeo and Juliet were also star-crossed lovers whose love for each other ended tragically. Nick, please don't believe it. Love between two people can last a long time if the people love themselves some and are ready to give love to another person. I was ready, and so was Matt. Your father is starting to embarrass me. He is too good to me and makes me so happy. Like today, he did it to me again. The house was filled with friends and family. When I came downstairs this morning, in floppy pink pajamas no less, with a sleepy expression on my face, I had almost forgotten that today was my birthday, my 36th. Matt hadn't. He had made a surprise breakfast, and I was surprised, all right. Unbelievably surprised. Matt, I said, laughing, embarrassed, wrapping my arms around my wrinkled pajamas, I'm going to murder you. He weaved through the people crowded into the kitchen. He was holding a glass of orange juice for me and wearing a silly grin. You're all witnesses. You heard my wife. She looks kind of harmless and sweet, but she's a killer. Happy birthday, Suzanne. Grandma Jean handed me her present, and she insisted I open it then and there. Inside was a beautiful blue silk robe, which I put on to hide my flannels. I gave Jean a big hug for bringing the perfect gift. The grub is hot, pretty good, and it's ready, Matt yelled, and everyone moved toward the groaning table, which was filled with eggs, several varieties of breakfast meats, sweet rolls, Jean's homemade babka, plenty of hot coffee. After everyone had their fill of this sumptuous breakfast, and yes, birthday cake, they filed from the house and left us alone. Matt and I collapsed onto the big comfy couch in the living room. So, how does it feel, Susie? Another birthday? I couldn't help smiling. You know, most people dread a birthday. They think, oh God, people will start looking at me like I'm old. Well, I feel the exact opposite. I feel that every day is an extraordinary gift, just to be here and especially to be with you. Thanks for the birthday party. I love you. Then Matt knew just the right thing to do. First, he leaned in and gave me the sweetest kiss on the lips. Then he carried me upstairs to our room, where we spent the rest of my birthday morning, and I must admit, most of my birthday afternoon.